Overnight, the Philippines faced one of the most dangerous storms of the year. A rapidly intensifying typhoon named Tino tore across the central islands with sustained winds near 95 mph and gusts reaching 125 mph. Entire neighborhoods were swallowed by floodwaters in minutes. Power grids collapsed, airports shut down, and more than 380,000 people rushed to evacuation centers as the storm made landfall. From Cebu City to the coastal towns of Leyte, families climbed onto rooftops, waving flashlights into the darkness, desperate to be rescued. As the storm raged on, meteorologists warned that Typhoon Tino could continue strengthening as it pushes into the West Philippine Sea, fueled by unusually warm ocean temperatures. Tonight, the Philippine people are fighting not just a storm, but a changing climate that's turning violent weather into everyday reality. When Typhoon Tino slammed into the central Philippines, the power of the storm became impossible to ignore. Towering waves pounded the coastline. Palm trees snapped like sticks. Metal roofing tore from homes and flew into the night like deadly blades. Floodwaters rushed through streets, swallowing cars and turning familiar neighborhoods into dark, churning rivers. In Cebu City, residents were jolted awake by the roar of the wind and the sudden rise of water flooding into their homes. Entire villages in northern Cebu disappeared beneath waist-deep to chest-deep water. Emergency responders launched rubber boats, but many could not get through. Bridges had collapsed and fallen power lines blocked major roads. In Talisay City, conditions grew so dangerous that residents were told to evacuate immediately or risk being trapped. Across the Visayas region, communication towers failed, plunging thousands into a terrifying silence. Airports and seaports suspended operations, leaving thousands of passengers stranded with nowhere to go. The Philippine Coast Guard warned that the sea state was too violent for any rescue attempt. With Tino's maximum sustained winds nearing 95 mph and gusts reaching 125 mph, the storm showed no sign of weakening. The disaster was only beginning. As the night deepened, fear rose with the floodwaters in Barangay Batayan. Families climbed onto rooftops holding children above the rising currents as murky water reached second-story windows. Flashlights flickered in the rain, tiny signals of life in a sea of darkness. "Please, anyone, help us," one resident pleaded in a trembling voice through a viral live stream. In Consolacion, residents trapped inside their homes punched holes through ceilings just to breathe. Emergency radios crackled with calls from terrified parents, toddlers crying in the background, pets howling as water surged inside. At a flooded wildlife park in Talisay City, rescuers feared crocodiles may have escaped through collapsed fences. Disaster officials rushed to secure the area, warning schools and nearby villages to stay away from swollen creeks. Hospitals began evacuating patients as backup generators failed, forcing nurses to carry the sick up slippery staircases in the dark. Power was completely knocked out for millions, leaving entire communities with no way to call for help. By dawn, the streets of Cebu City had become rivers of debris, refrigerators, furniture, and shattered roofs tumbling through intersections where families once walked. Survival was no longer about protecting homes. It was about staying alive. Typhoon Tino didn't strike by chance. It was engineered by a warming ocean. Satellite data showed sea surface temperatures above 86 degrees Celsius across the western Pacific. The perfect fuel. Warm water evaporates faster, feeding storms with moisture and heat. As Tino moved closer to land, it rapidly intensified, jumping from a tropical storm to a 95 mph typhoon in less than 24 hours. Meteorologists from Pagasa and the U.S. Joint Typhoon Warning Center pointed to the storm's massive wind field extending more than 185 miles from the center, meaning even areas far from the core faced destructive winds and relentless rain. The storm's timing made things even worse. A seasonal weather pattern known as La Niña strengthened rain bands across the region, while mountain ranges in Leyte and Cebu forced moisture upward, squeezing out extreme rainfall at dangerous speeds. At the same time, rising sea levels meant higher storm surges. Waves pushed up to 10 feet high, overwhelming seawalls and swallowing coastal homes that once stood safely above the tides. Climate scientists warn this is what stronger storms look like in a warming world. Tino wasn't just a weather event. It was a preview of the storms to come. When the winds finally eased, the heartbreak began to surface. Local officials confirmed multiple deaths. An elderly man swept away by a flash flood in southern Leyte. A giant tree uprooted by 125 kph gusts crashing down onto a family vehicle in Bohol. But numbers alone could not capture the trauma left behind. Farmers walked through fields that had once promised a season's harvest, now buried under thick brown floodwater. Families sifted through debris where their living rooms used to be, searching for anything that could still be saved. School uniforms, family photos, a child's lost toy. More than 3,000 passengers were stranded in ports, tens of thousands sheltered. Inside crowded school gyms, sleeping on the cold floor with nothing but a blanket to their name. In Cebu, parents held their children tightly each night, listening for the next rumble of thunder, the next siren. The next moment, they might have to run again. Millions remained without electricity. Communication networks barely worked. 4. Many communities cut off by landslides, help had not yet arrived. Typhoon Tino had not just damaged homes. It had shaken hearts, minds, and futures. As floodwaters kept rising, the race to save lives surged into high gear. Over 200 rescue personnel from the armed forces and Coast Guard deployed across Cebu, launching boats into violent currents to reach families trapped on rooftops. Helicopters hovered low above flooded subdivisions, airlifting the most vulnerable, the elderly, children, and those unable to swim, to safety. The Philippine Red Cross delivered thousands of food packs, bottled water, and blankets to evacuation centers overflowing with evacuees. In the hardest-hit barangays, volunteer groups formed human chains to guide survivors through chest-deep floodwaters. Across the Visayas region, 75-plus flights were canceled. Major seaports shut down, highways blocked by landslides and toppled power poles. President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. ordered a nationwide mobilization of relief forces, urging local governments to evacuate aggressively and early. No hesitation, no delays, officials repeated through megaphones and radio broadcasts. In Talisay City, veterinarians and wildlife staff scrambled to secure animals from a flooded sanctuary, preventing a different kind of danger. But for thousands still stranded without power or clean water, the question remained, would help arrive in time? When the rain finally eased, the silence felt heavier than the storm. Across the Visayas, entire communities lay in ruins. Roads fractured, bridges twisted apart, farms drowned under thick layers of mud. In Cebu City, residents returned to homes they could no longer enter, their doorways clogged with debris, floors buried in sludge, power lines tangled and dead. Food supplies were running low, hospitals were struggling, and clean drinking water became the most valuable resource of all. Scientists warned this disaster is not just another typhoon. It's part of a disturbing trend reshaping the world's coastlines. The Philippines, a country facing around 20 storms every year, now endures stronger winds, higher storm surges, and rainfall far heavier than in the past. Why? Because our oceans are hotter, because sea levels are rising, because carbon pollution is supercharging the storms of tomorrow. Over the past decade, disasters like Super Typhoon Haiyan, Yolanda, have served as warnings. Now, Typhoon Tino sends another message louder than ever. The climate is changing, and coastal cities worldwide are in the path. The question is no longer if another storm will come, it's how much stronger the next one will be. The storm has passed, but the struggle is far from over. Families in Cebu, Leyte, and Samar are now stepping into streets covered in shattered glass, twisted metal, and memories they can never replace. Schools will rebuild, homes will rise again, and children will return to playgrounds that for one terrifying night became rivers. Because the people of the Philippines have learned something the world must never forget. Resilience is stronger than any storm. But as the climate grows hotter and storms grow stronger, their fight becomes our warning. The next Tino, the next deadly surge, the next city swallowed by water could be anywhere, and so the question reaches beyond borders. Will we adapt? Will we protect the vulnerable? Will we listen before another disaster strikes? If you believe their courage deserves to be seen and their story deserves to be heard, help us raise awareness. Like this video, share their story. Subscribe for more real-world coverage of our planet's fiercest storms. Together, we honor survivors. Together, we learn. Together, we prepare for the storms of